I think that's a really interesting observation because a lot of people, I think, are maybe subscribing to the fact that things are maybe hard. A lot of people are finding or saying that the creative industry is hard, right? Or it's challenging. Have you found it challenging?
Rejection is a fundamental within business, then that's going to serve you within sales scenarios. That's going to serve you just generally in your life, right? I think it's a very fundamental just within life, just rejection in general.
Do you think that many people struggle with that emotional side of video, like having it in there and or thinking about how to add it in? Because that's, for me, that's the key sales metric.
Ultimately, how do you capture that moment? It's impossible because you don't know when that moment's going to happen. So it's very important to have as much coverage as possible, basically. It's what we always say to people is like, yes, one videographer or one camera operator can come and cover your event, but you are limited in terms of the moments that you can capture and the things that we don't know are going to happen, but will happen. We know they're going to happen. We just don't know when, we don't know where, we don't know how.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to a brand new episode of this week's podcast. Today, I'm going to be with Oliver talking about all things video and also starting off with niching because it's something that we actually both kind of do opposites, I would say. For those who don't know, Oliver, like, firstly, I guess, like, what niche do you operate in? And then secondly, why did you choose to go into that niche?
Yeah, it's a great question, man. So first off, happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me on. Excited to chat to you for the next kind of hour or so about everything events and video and marketing and all of that sort of stuff. So ultimately, the question around niching, we've been doing this for nearly 5 years. We've dotted around a lot of different service offerings and niches and markets, if you want to call it that, and stuff. Really, the decision ultimately came because of the ambition that I have for the company long term. I want to scale. I want to grow. I want to specialize within particular areas and stuff like that. And I think ultimately, if you're looking to do that, it's much easier to do that when you decide on a niche or a market or an industry that you can really kind of get your teeth into and become an expert in. I know that it's cliche, but it's kind of that classic saying of like GP versus brain surgeon, you know, who gets paid more. And it's the person that is a specialist. I think if you had a problem with your brain, you would much rather go to a brain surgeon than a GP, and you would probably pay the money because you know that that person is going to be able to solve your problems, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I guess the critical part of my head is like, so how was, obviously we didn't predict COVID, no one could predict COVID, right, in the respect to like how drastic it was in respect to maybe how it changed the event industry, etc. But like, I know that the event industry as a whole was maybe one of the ones that was hit harder. I mean, how was that from a, because that would be like the counter argument to like, well, you kind of got a risk in that respect. Like there is an argument to be made about the specialist, absolutely. And I'm sure we'll get into that a bit more, but did you in some ways, I don't really use the term regret, but did you regret that during COVID?
Well, COVID was kind of the birth of the business, right? So we were still playing around in the very early days when COVID first hit. But yeah, I do know that obviously the events industry was hit really hard. From a video perspective and a video production perspective, I do know that a lot of the agencies or production companies, shall we say, who made the pivot to hybrid production and live streaming and that sort of stuff, when they kind of had that as a string in their bow, let's say, they did really well because it was kind of a select few companies that were doing it and doing it immediately. So yes, I think you can make that argument. There is the other side of the argument that is that the events industry came back stronger probably than most industries, I would say, as well. I think that a lot of industries, let's say like high street and product and e-commerce and that sort of stuff, that was hit really hard after COVID, just because it was very much like a paradigm shift in people's minds, like they didn't need to go to the high street anymore. Whereas the events industry is ultimately built on human to human connection. And we hadn't had that for so long that I think it really bounced back quite strong. But I just wasn't involved in the industry at that point. So I couldn't really comment on kind of what I saw from a business perspective.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a fair assumption. I mean, I guess I was going to bring in AI later, but I think now's a really great time. Do you see maybe an increase in demand? Because I think people are kind of going two ways with AI. Like a lot of people are utilizing it. A lot of people are using it for efficiency, sure. But maybe they're, I guess in some ways, wanting that emotional connection, wanting that human to human connection, whether that's in person or equivalent, maybe more, because things are becoming. I mean, maybe this is just a byproduct of what happened with COVID, right? Because we were all locked in our houses and talking through Zoom and this kind of thing. But for me, it was really interesting watching and relaunching this series of the podcast as a hybrid kind of approach, right? Some episodes will be like this, other episodes will be in person, etc. And I think for me, it's been very interesting to see the difference in reaction when it comes to, I guess, some people wanting to have that more human-to-human connection. And I'm starting to feel that there is a different energy that does actually happen when you're in person. I mean, do you think that's kind of, I guess, one of the unique selling propositions of events going stronger to stronger in respect to, like, maybe in the next couple of years, as a lot of people would say potentially the economy maybe continue to be challenging, right? I think it's something you can overcome, of course, but just to reiterate the question, do you think that more people are going to be driven towards in-person stuff, even with the advent of AI and etc.?
I think so. I think that ultimately, when you have a strong trend heading in one direction, there's always a counterculture group of people that ultimately reject it. Like, think about when the internet came in. I'm sure that those people that loved reading books and kind of going to libraries and stuff like that, that had a massive boom. Ultimately, with the conversation around AI, I don't think it's worth rejecting, because it's here and it's here to stay, and it's going to revolutionize so many different industries. But ultimately, the events industry as a whole is pretty well hedged against AI, because of that human to human connection, right? I think that it will do a lot with regards to, let's say, the ticketing process, the operational, the logistics, all of that sort of stuff. I think that will really help, because there's probably a lot of human error that's made as a result of just having to check so many names and so much data, and all of that sort of stuff. However, I think that what it will do is it will weed out the events that don't really have a strong selling proposition. And I think that the events that do have a strong selling proposition, i.e. festivals, or really solid business conferences and stuff that people get a lot of value from, I think that those will be held in an even higher regard than they already are, because of the fact that it's so different to what people are used to experiencing on a day-to-day basis.
I think that's a really interesting observation, because a lot of people, I think, are probably maybe subscribing to the fact that things are maybe harder, right? Like, I've been filming a handful of podcasts across the last couple of days, and a lot of the conversations I'm having in them is about a lot of people are finding or saying that the creative industry is hard, right? Or it's challenging. Have you found it challenging? And if so, how did you change, like, when it was maybe challenging? Maybe it isn't right now, but if it isn't, how have you pushed through that? And is it just because you niche specifically, do you think?
I think that that's probably part of it, for sure. I wouldn't lie to myself in the sense that, well, we didn't pick events purely because it was hedged well against AI. It's just worked out really well. I think that if I was a production company, let's say, who niched into like animation or explainer videos or something that could quite easily be done by AI, I would probably have a plan B in terms of like pivoting. But I don't know. I think it's an interesting question. A couple of things that I'll say is that I think that your mindset and your perception around things can entirely dictate how hard things are for you. So if you believe it is hard, then you will unconsciously do things that affirm that belief. So I think that's something that people have to look out for. Ultimately, there is going to be, and there already is, a gap in the market for people that do things not with AI. Like some of the YouTube series and stuff that I watch, at the start of the video, they have a disclaimer that says like proudly produced by humans and stuff like that. And for somebody that values that and values the human input into creativity, for me, that's an even stronger reason to continue backing and watching that channel, right? So that's kind of just like a micro abstraction just there. What it's definitely done and what I've seen is on the post-production side of things, we're certainly less involved than we used to be. So I feel like internal marketing teams are utilizing, let's say, like AI short form editors. But in terms of being on the ground and actually filming the events, I think until it gets to the point where there's like robots and, you know, Elon Musk Tesla bots and stuff that can kind of run around with cameras and stuff like that, I think we're pretty safe for now, to be honest.
No, I agree. And I think Of course, we don't know where AI is going to go, right? So it would be wrong of me to say, oh, that's never going to happen. But I think that actually, when we get to that stage, I don't believe personally. We'll see what happens, of course, but I don't personally believe that that will be the thing that's replaced. In warehouses, yeah, absolutely. In like repair jobs where it's dangerous or equivalent, yeah. Soldiers, if you're gonna have to fight a war, yeah, etc. Things like that, I can absolutely see. But just quickly on the event side, I mean, do you see people maybe underutilizing the concept of like a hybrid event still because it's not, I guess, as cool, I was going to use the term, but like not as maybe ROI positive if you want to like lean into it business wise because we're not in COVID anymore?
I don't know. I think that there's still a massive use case for hybrid events. Ultimately, the main benefit being that you can attract a global audience, not just a local audience or a national audience, let's say. If you look at some of the people that are top of their game, Alex Hormozy, Tony Robbins, they always do virtual or hybrid events to a really high-end production standard, with the huge Zoom screens in the background, and you can see how many people are on the call and stuff like that. I think that ultimately, if you're going to produce a hybrid event, it can't just be 7 people sat on a Zoom call talking about stuff. I think you really have to go the extra mile with regards to like all of the energy that you would have put into the logistics and the in-person experience. If you take that energy and you put it into, okay, how can we make the hybrid experience better? I feel like you will definitely have a better event and a more engaging and valuable event for your delegates as well, for sure.
I think that, yeah, I think that's the key. I think it's about like actually branching out a new audience and maybe having, from a strategic side, maybe looking at like, here's a online ticket versus here how you can be in the room, right? And having a different tier in that respect. But when we look at marketing, right now, obviously maybe we're going to talk directly at events, but like it could also, I believe, be used more generalized. What do you think event? I'll ask it in an event way, but it will probably branch out outside of that as well. What do you think people are missing in event marketing right now?
What do I think they're missing?
Like, what should they be doing, in your opinion, that they're maybe not doing?
Well, ultimately, it's totally dependent on where the bottleneck is within your marketing system, right? This is what we say on every single discovery call with a potential client or a prospect, if you want to call them that. Like, are you getting enough eyes? I.e., is there a ton of people filling the funnel, but you have a conversion issue? Like, there's not enough people converting into actual ticket sales or sponsor conversations or whatever that might be, or have you got fantastic conversion metrics, but you haven't got enough volume? Like, I think ultimately, what a lot of people struggle with event marketing is that they try and produce stuff efficiently that is going to appeal to everybody. But at the end of the day, what a sponsor wants to see versus what a visitor wants to see versus what an exhibitor wants to see versus what a speaker wants to see, they're kind of your main 4 stakeholders, right? They're totally different pieces of content. And I think that events and event marketing teams specifically should take a lot more time to consider where is the bottleneck and really what are we trying to do over the next 12 months in the lead up to our events, and produce content purely for that. I feel like they're trying to solve 4 problems, whereas if you just dial down and solve 1 problem, and then you'll have another problem off the back of it, but you can continue to do that, right? And it will just work in this cyclical cycle. I think also one of the biggest impact factors when it comes to video specifically for events is speed to market. People are used to waiting 2 to 4 weeks to get their video back from kind of a standard videographer, but ultimately you have to like just as quick as possible, like ideally minus 10 hours, right? You need to be getting the videos out. We kind of say 48 hours is the max. If you want to capitalize on the traffic and the buzz and the selfies and the tags and everything that's happening on social media after an event, you need to be publishing that video and putting it out to your list and kind of engaging with as many people as possible to get those rebooks, because ultimately it's like somebody is so likely to rebook pretty much there and then, or like just after. If you wait like a week, the emotions have died down, the memories have faded, and you're just not going to get as good conversion, basically.
Yeah. Do you think that many people struggle with that emotional side of video? Like having it in there and or thinking about how to add it in? Because that's, for me, that's the key sales metric to an extent of when you have a video. It's can you showcase, highlight, show in a form that will then have an emotional either reaction or showing the actual emotion that took place at the event, for example. Do you think that's something that maybe some people lose, either because of the self-confidence of like, how do I capture this moment, or actually we missed the moment because we didn't predict it, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it's both. Ultimately, how do you capture that moment? It's impossible because you don't know when that moment's going to happen. So it's very important to have as much coverage as possible. Basically, it's what we always say to people: is like, yes, one videographer or one camera operator can come and cover your event, but you are limited in terms of the moments that you can capture and the things that we don't know are going to happen but will happen. We know they're going to happen, we just don't know when, we don't know where, we don't know how, right? And then your second question was,
That maybe it's a
just remind
struggle,
me.
like a struggling confidence, right? Because I think, like, so I'll give you an example. First time I ever filmed someone crying in an interview, I had this emotional, like, care reaction to them to be like, I should cut the camera. Now, in this context, it wasn't my set and that wasn't my call to make. So I was very, like, I need to be disciplined and not press the button. But my reaction was, this person, like, the human side of it was like, this person's clearly upset. Do you push through that? Like, do you, like, when it's more, like, emotionally charged or emotionally feel? But because I think for a content point of view, there's maybe a moral question, because yes, that footage is like really powerful to tell the story and really like useful from a marketing context. But also, I think we have an obligation, maybe as videographers or directors or whatever role you sit in production, to say, well, okay, but at what point do we say actually we should give this person 5 minutes?
I'm a big advocate of forgiveness, not permission. Like, obviously you have to ask somebody's permission in order to use a very vulnerable and emotional clip within there. I think that it's also important to explain to that person the reasons why, beyond just more ticket sales or something like that, right? If you've got like a particularly inspiring event or a particularly inspiring moment, that their vulnerability and emotion could inspire, motivate somebody else in that position who comes from a similar background and that sort of thing. But if you cut the camera, then you never have the opportunity to use that clip should you want to. So I would always say, like, I think push through it is probably the wrong term. It's more of a case of just let the moment unfold, let whatever is going to happen, and then decide how you're going to use it later. I would much rather have it and then not use it than not be able to use it because I didn't have it.
Yeah. Do you think? I mean, I know we discussed briefly when we were setting this up as well, and I'm going to get a little bit into mindset to give you some clarity. But for me, I think I've always been a very disciplined person, and I think it bridges quite nicely onto what we were discussing there about like the emotional stuff. But like, I agree with you in respect to like, if it's not, because you can get retroactive permission, and with the context you're potentially going to use it for, and actually that's probably a nicer way of saying how you're potentially going to use it. But is in more generalized term, when you're looking at business, or when you're looking at maybe touching back to when things are harder perhaps, and you need to do the extra hours, you need to do that one more rep on the sales call, or do one more sales call, one more discovery call, one more piece of content, etc. Is that just a discipline thing in your experience?
What, in terms of pushing through?
Yeah, just doing
when
it.
you don't
Right,
want to do something.
yeah, like doing it. So like sometimes, because for me, I have the evidence that that is what will be pushing me to the point where I will be able to get the result I'm looking for, especially if my back's against the wall. And when I was like, oh, I'm motivated, that would have potentially meant I didn't do it because it's uncomfortable, right? So what in Christ, what we're talking about here is uncomfortability. And I guess, when is it appropriate to push through uncomfortability? And how does someone, if they are looking to build it, how do they build it?
I think that, I mean, discipline is definitely something I can speak on because it's something that I've had to learn massively. I definitely come from a type B, go with the flow type background, and that's not particularly conducive to somebody that can sit down and work and focus for an extended period of time on things that aren't particularly exciting and aren't particularly engaging to work on. I think that what's really important if somebody's kind of getting started is to find out where your limits are. So I think we've kind of gone through this like hustle culture. And then on the back of that, we've kind of got this, like, for want of a better word, like snowflake culture now at the moment, which is very much like, if you don't feel like doing it, don't do it. If you're, nervous, that's okay. You don't have to do things, etc., etc. There's definitely that kind of energy around at the moment. And I think that it's really useful to know where your limits are and push yourself to the edge, so that then when something like that comes up, you can ultimately kind of just look with a bit of foresight and say, okay, yes, like today I might need to work 12 hours, but that might mean that tomorrow I can only work 6. So would it be better for me to just do 8 and 8 and feel better on the back of it, right? I think that you ultimately have to go through a process of kind of understanding yourself and your energy. One thing that's been really helpful for me to do that is kind of tracking energy versus hours versus focus on a day-to-day basis. Now, obviously, this is kind of qualitative data, right? You can't, there's no like Whoop or something that's going to tell you kind of like how you're feeling that day. But I think if you learn to see patterns in your behavior and you learn to see patterns within the way that you go about doing things, you can kind of predict that, okay, maybe today I need to take it a bit lighter, right? Like events, to bring it back to kind of what we do, are so intense. The hours are insane. I'm lucky that I'm an extroverted person, but even I get kind of burnt out, speaking to so many, like running so many interviews in the day, asking the same questions and all of that sort of stuff. So when I come back from, let's say, like a 3 or 4 day event, I know that I need to take a couple of days, right? Just to kind of recalibrate. And I know that I need to fall back into a routine that is healthy and sustainable for me in the long run, So I think it's that push and pull, it's that balance. Ultimately, it's just a case of knowing yourself and kind of knowing where your limits are, but constantly reassessing those limits so that you are getting the most out of every hour that you put in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, there's different stages in your life, right? There might be, I'll use your example, like you've just come off an event, you're absolutely like, this is my 4th interview out of 5 this week, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm aware that like my performance may start to like pull or start to be not as sharp as I was in the first one, so I may pull back after this 5, right? And that's a key understanding. But also, like, what else is going on around those interviews? Well, actually, all I've got is editing time, so doing the editing things that I need to do, and then the general working out or other, social activities, etc. So actually, in reality, my focus can be given to this hour, and my prep can be given to this hour, and etc. So the key is, for me, is actually like, it's about working hard and working smart, sure, but it's also about understanding. I work in sprints personally. So I will sprint to the point where I'm like, fucking hell, I'm about to burn out. Then I'll stop, look at the data, and now analyze what I did, analyze how well the interviews did, watch them back, etc. Make a debrief report, and then I'll go again, right? And rinse, and rinse, and rinse, and rinse. And what ends up, I think, personally happening, from my perspective at least, is you end up getting more 1% wins. And something I wanted to touch on as well that I think your niching approach really, really focuses on and allows you to become very efficient at what you do is, and I've noticed this since I've really focused on like 2 main pillars of content for like a chunk of time. So previously, before I did this, I was very, I've got some podcasts, cool, we're going to post them, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, and then I do this. And of course, in hindsight, I could say, well, of course I didn't get traction because I wasn't looking at the micro improvements upon each interview. I wasn't looking at how far ahead can I get, for example. I mean, we're filming this towards the end of the summer. It won't be released until back end of October. And for me, it's about then saying, okay, well, in that window of time when I have the buffer, it's not that I'm not interviewing. I can then like do the stuff in the business to keep the business alive, right? And I don't have to necessarily worry about where the podcast is. But just like looking forward specifically on ROI, because I think people will look at a podcast and maybe like think about, well, what's the ROI? And it bridges into how do you look at it from a perspective of why should a sponsor or a event provider or etc. Like, where is it just a marketing budget that someone has for the event in your case normally? That's how they do the video work with you? And then if so, like, what's your ROI metrics on those?
Well, it's always about value. So whenever we're in if you want to call it a sales situation, like it would be sales, right? But I'm always very keen to constantly bring the conversation back to the value that we're providing rather than the day rate, let's say, or how much or what our prices are, for example. really it's about understanding, okay, cool, how many sponsors are you looking to bring on if that is your objective? What's the standard ticket price? What's the tiers? Okay, so reasonably we can expect that if we did bring on, let's say, 3 new sponsors over the next 12 months, that contributes to X amount of revenue for you in the long run, right? So then you compare it against the value, and ultimately then the marketing budget might expand a little bit because of the potential that can come off the back of it, if that makes sense. Now, in terms of ROI, I've always found it, and it always will be, I think, relatively difficult without the advent of kind of paid ads and stuff like that to track the ROI on video content. Like, how do you do that? You just can't really, and it's always been a struggle that we've kind of faced, because ultimately there's a lot of inference that's kind of involved in those conversations. But yeah, a sponsor could want lots of different things from an event. They could want straight ROI, let's say, like if it's a bank and they just want people to come and bank with them, and they're going to put all of their money in and they're going to generate the interest, off of the fact of that being there. It could be brand alignment, right? It could be the fact that a sponsor is looking to tap into a different market, a younger market, an older market, and aligning themselves with a particular brand that carries that audience is going to do that. And then in the long run, they can expect XYZ returns for that and stuff like that as well. It could be general brand awareness as well. There's a lot of different angles, but I think that ultimately, if the event sales team dug into the sponsor conversations in the same way that we do, and actually kind of helps that sponsor understand the value that they can expect over the next kind of 12 months or 18 months if they did commit to a sponsorship package, I think that they'd have a lot more success, basically. And then you've got the video content to back it all up, right? The video content from an event is proof, ultimately, that the thing happened and it was fantastic and that it got the audience that the sales team is telling the sponsor that they got, basically.
Do you think people are hesitant to pay more than, like, let's just say, for example, like, a standard videographer can do it for a price, right? And you or I might be like B price or C price, right? And we're looking at the value, we're looking at the value we're going to add to a client rather than necessarily the time that we're going to spend doing that, right? There is obviously time involved, sure, but we don't focus on, in my belief, we share that in that respect. We don't focus on the time, we focus on the value or the transformation that we're adding to that client. Do you think people would struggle, or sometimes clients would just go, oh, they're cheaper, so we'll take them?
They do sometimes. I think it depends on who you're speaking to. Ultimately, the person that I'm really looking to work with and attract into my business is not that type of person who price is the deciding factor. So I don't really concern myself with those sorts of people. If I do find myself on a conversation with that type of person where they're basically playing like a race to the bottom, is essentially what we're talking about here, I will confidently sit there and say, look, we can be beaten on price, and the reason is X. If you don't understand that, that's fine. You're just not in the right position for us at the moment. That, come back to us when you, like, without sounding cocky, just come back to us when you understand that didn't get you the result that you're looking for. So you're actually wasting money. You've wasted money now. Like, and then we're going to have a different conversation in 12 months time. This is the great thing about events, is that, like, there is always 12 months, right? There's always going to be another event. Hopefully, if you've got a good event, you're going to put it on time and time and time again. So there's always opportunity to have another conversation, basically.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, I guess, does that say more about, like, you then? Like, having the ability to say no to a client, or saying, actually, maybe we're not the right fit? Because I was having a conversation a handful of weeks ago with a new client, and he said, well, one of the reasons why he went with me, even though I was more expensive, was because I don't work with everyone, which I found really unique. But I've been just like, I'm protecting my time constantly because I want to be able to run the podcast. I want to be able to put a lot of time into our marketing and our sales and such, and our scalability and our growth. So for me, I'm like, actually, I only have a finite amount of, like, availability for clients. And I think for me, that's always been the case. But I didn't always, I sort of had to grow into the confidence, I guess, of saying, well, actually, I can say no to this client if they're not the right fit. Did you personally always have that, or was that a skill that you've developed through, however many years?
I don't think it's a skill that we've developed. I think it's a confidence that I've grown purely just because we've got good systems. Like, we've got systems that book calls on repeat. We've got systems, like, we know the metrics. We know if we speak to 20 people, that then roughly 30% of them will convert over time at a lifetime value of X, whatever, right? So, like, I know my numbers, and it's okay if it's okay that 70% of those people don't go ahead at that time, right? Because we know how the business operates and we know kind of where that comes from. I think that ultimately what you're talking about is, again, the power of niche, right? Because you might not have a particular industry that you work with, but you have particular types of people that you work with. And that's kind of the power of it, is that, you're not saying yes to everybody. And I think that that makes the people that you are saying yes to feel even more included in your service, because they know it's for them. There is value in paying more, right? From a client's perspective, there's an assurance behind it. There's confidence behind it. There's there's just power behind saying no.
Yeah, I think it also goes into that perspective of it comes with a level of prestige if you want to look at branding or marketing as well. Like, why do we perceive Rolex in the way we perceive it? Why do we perceive Audi, BMW, so on, so on, so on, in the way we perceive it? Do you, either for clients or yourself, look to trend jack or look at what is, quote, trending when you look to do your own marketing?
My marketing?
Yeah, personally for you.
No, I don't.
Okay, and why don't you?
I don't. Because the type of people that I will attract through following trends are not the type of people that want me for me. I would much rather a video that I produce get 50 views, but all of those 50 people love that video and get invested in the things that I'm saying and be the types of people that I made that video for, than 100,000 people when, like, really none of them actually wanted to watch it. They wanted to watch the trend. That's what they're looking. They're trying to watch the trend. They're not interested in the actual content itself, right? Now, there definitely is a place for trends. It's just such the fact that we don't have the resources, i.e. time or money, to jump on particular things. My available resource for marketing my own business is extremely limited. So I'm going to do activities that I know are going to get the biggest return. And ultimately, with a trend, I don't know whether it's going to work or not, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think sometimes, not us maybe, but a person, starting out videographer, starting out business, they look at the potential likelihood that they could get something to like 1 million views, let's just say, for example. And they're like, oh my God, that's going to change my business overnight. And not speaking as someone who's had a video hit 1 million, but I know people who have, and I go, how much money did you get for it? Nothing. Right? So I guess the follow-on question then, you spoke about like that you're only going to do the things that really work. Okay, if you don't mind sharing, what does really work for you then in marketing?
Cold outbound.
Okay.
Has always worked for us, because I've always been a fan of outbound, because you go to the market doesn't come to you. I think there's definitely pros and cons to both, but essentially, if I message 20 to 50 people per week, they are the exact type of person that I'm looking to work with, right? Versus, let's say, we also do paid ads. So I don't want, we also do inbound marketing as well. But like, for example, I dialed up all of our inbound paid ad leads this morning. One of them was qualified. And I think I spoke to like 20 people. So you have no control over the type of people that are coming in, which is a bit more of a waste of time. But the flip side of that coin is that when you do find that person, they've already consumed your content. They already know who you are. They're already interested in working with you because they've clicked through. They've made that action themselves, right? Whereas on the outbound side of things, you probably have to do a bit more persuading, because it's a case of like, who are you? I don't know you. You've just connected with me on LinkedIn and now you're messaging me, right?
Yeah. For me, I love cold outreach because I want to have it as a skill set to have in my back pocket for when I need to use it or want to use it. What advice would you give to, say, a starting out creator, starting out videographer, etc., or someone in the creative industry who looks at cold and goes, that's terrifying? Because I think that's really common, right? And it might come from like the rejection side. It might just be the nature of they haven't done the reps yet. But what would you say to those kind of people who are like, because you're obviously a massive advocate for outbound, cold outbound, right?
I would say that rejection is a fundamental within business. So the amount of experience, if you can become comfortable with people saying no, then that's going to serve you within sales scenarios. That's going to serve you just generally in your life, right? I think it's a very fundamental just within life, just rejection in general. What I would say with outbound is that you are you people severely underestimate the volume that is required in order to get returns. People think that they're just going to send like 10 messages and get 5 clients. It does not work like that. For example, our metrics on purely cold people is like a 4% appointment booking rate, and then off of those appointments, I'll convert maybe 30% of those people into actual clients, right? So let's say that you did 100 outbound cold approaches. You're going to book 4 people, and you might sign 1 client. So it's going to take you a long, like it takes volume, it takes time. And then obviously with that volume becomes skill. You learn what works, what doesn't. You learn how to say things. You learn how to deal with objections in the DMs as well. Like a lot of people aren't saying no because they don't want to work with you. They're saying no because you're a stranger. It's just like when somebody knocks on your door, right? You're trying everything in your power to get out of that conversation. But ultimately there could be somebody that knocks on your door that could change your life. You just don't know. And I think you have to take the perspective of like, this client is going to benefit. It's the same as in a sales scenario, but like you've got to do everything within your power to get that person over the line, because ultimately you know that you can come in and change their business, right, through what you do, because you're good at what you do, right?
Yeah. And I think for me, I mean, the mindset I heard from a fellow guest a handful of weeks ago was something along the lines of, I'm doing them a disservice by not allowing them to understand that I exist, right? Because
Exactly.
And this sounds hugely egotistical. It does, right? It does. But the key is, I know I'm really good at my thing, and I know I can create really strong results. So actually what I'm doing by making it appealing, obvious that they should work with us, is actually I'm making sure they don't make a mistake on who they hire, because I don't want my potential client to lose money, right? And with that rewire in my head, you then can approach cold differently, in my view. Now, there is an argument to say, like, is it in stages? Like, would you only do it when... Because I guess the perception for cold is you only do it when your back's against the wall, you need to make money quickly, right? But actually, in correspondence to what you just said, that's counterintuitive, because you just said it would take a long time. So, is that true? Or is it actually just something that you just gain the reps of and you just do consistently, and that's why it works?
No, I think that it's for us, it will always be a system that we have within the business. I mean, again, it's purely just based on experience, right? But it's always been the thing that's worked for me the best, be it cold email or cold DM. The thing that people don't get is that, like, for one, you have to be intelligent about how you message people insofar as you're not going to piss them off, right? You're just looking for a yes or a no to essentially have a call and see if it could be a good fit to work together. You don't need to do like tons and tons and tons of follow-up and like ultimately just get that person in a position where they don't like you because you've messaged them so many times or whatever. But you have to look at cold in a sense that it's contributing to a larger overall system. So if you have content systems in place, inbound content systems, like let's just take somebody on LinkedIn, for example. So somebody could connect with me on LinkedIn. I could message them. That could ultimately be, no, I'm not really interested right now. They would then get drip fed my content over the next kind of 3 months. And then in 3 months, I will go back to I will basically then go back and I message all of the people who are now somewhat warm to what we do. And it's just that constant thing over time. It's like Chinese water torture. You're just slowly drip feeding stuff onto them so that they get more familiar and more familiar and more familiar. And don't get me wrong, 4 times out of 100, somebody will book a call cold, and that's fine because they have a low action threshold. But ultimately what you're doing is you're putting them into a maybe system that's converting them into a yes over time. And I've had tons of people reach out to say, hey, I know you messaged me 6 months ago, but I'd love to jump on a call now. And that's great. That happens on probably a bi-weekly basis, right?
Yeah. And I think for me, it's in some ways, even if it isn't the right time for that prospect, that person that you're messaging, actually what you're doing is you're saying, hey, remember me, right? Every time you message, and that should be the way. Or, hey, I saw this thing, hopefully it'd be valuable to you, right? Or whenever you maybe share a piece of content, I always look at it of going, how can I add as much value in the window of time they're going to potentially give me, whether this is in a short form clip or the entire podcast. And I think for me, that's what makes me maybe unique, I guess you could say, in the respect to I don't like to fluff around, and I try not to, if that makes sense. I don't like other people who do. And it's simply because you just don't respect the other person's time, right? But I think I guess the key, you mentioned Alex Hormozy earlier, and I wanted to ask you something specifically about, he's very well known for, you need to focus on doing one thing for an extended period of time. And what does that actually mean in tangibility reality, and does it actually work, I guess, is then the follow-on question. So like, is it going to be you just focus solely on cold and you don't then look at content, you don't look at etc., or actually is it you get to a certain level of doing it consistently, you have a system, and then you can add another thing? Do you think?
I think it gets to the point where the system's working and then you outsource it and then you build the next one. Like ultimately there's a literal job role that is an appointment setter, which is somebody that takes control of your social media accounts, goes into the DMs and does what you do. And you give them the system and you say, hey, if you message 100 people, 4 of them will book and I'll pay you for the 4 people that book. Right. So I think that's kind of the process. I don't necessarily agree with this whole thing of do one thing and focus on it for a long period of time, because there are gains that you are probably missing out on by not having an inbound system. Like if you purely just do cold, right? Really, content is one of those things that we've always struggled with, purely just because I do it so much for the clients that then when it comes to doing it for myself, it's kind of you're not you're not as open to doing it, right? But I do think that, like I just said, those people that don't necessarily come through the first time being cold will look at the content, they'll see that it's valuable, they'll see that we know what we're talking about and that we're working with other clients helping them achieve the exact same thing, and then they'll be more open to it. So I feel like if we didn't do that, then you would miss out on those things as well. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I think that's why you have to take it with a pinch of salt, right? It's true that if you try and start too many things simultaneously, you'll fail at all of them, right? But you also need to know your own limits and ask yourself, how many plates can you continue to spin, right? I think is actually the key there. But for those who are maybe looking at like either doing an event or hiring you, like, or any production as a whole, like I build a system where I try and do a behind the scenes breakdown of every single production that I've done, right? And I build that very early and I build it into my sales process so the client's cool with it, the client, etc., etc. But like for me, I guess the question is like, do you do behind the scenes content, A, and then B, if you do, how do you manage that resource? Because obviously you're there actually working. Now, I would argue that's the best content you could possibly create for what you do, right? Because it shows you in your element, shows you problem solving, etc. Like, is it just a matter of like hiring another videographer and maybe you take a little hit on the profit to follow you around specifically, or like is it in more depth than that?
Yeah, for sure. It's basically that. We have experimented in the past with purely trying to get behind the scenes from the crew that's already on site to do the job. But ultimately, I think that you're doing a disservice to your clients and to the crew by doing that, because that's not what they're there to do. The client hasn't hired you so that you can make an amazing behind the scenes film using the camera operators and crew that they've paid for, right? So you're going to piss your clients off by doing that. The best way that I've found is to essentially just have somebody whose sole job it is to take behind the scenes imagery and behind the scenes video of everybody doing their thing. And yes, you do take a hit on your profit, but you have to look at it as a long-term marketing resource. One thing that I want to experiment with doing that we haven't done just yet is to cut out the talking to camera aspects of the behind the scenes video, because no matter how hard I try, I can't focus on 2 different video projects at the same time, right? It's very difficult for me to think about how the behind the scenes video is going when I just need to be focused on the client's work, essentially. So what I want to start doing is bringing somebody whose sole job it is to do that, have me mic'd up the whole time, and then have those clips of the problem solving and have those clips of us working on a day-to-day, bring that back in, and then probably review it with the camera in the studio, and basically just say like, look, this is the context, this is the situation, here's what happened, here's how I dealt with it, have a look, right? That I think is going to be a much more valuable resource. And I think that we'd be able to turn one behind the scenes video into probably 5, because there'll be multiple instances of problem solving over time. So that's something that I've discussed with the team, and that we're going to start doing moving forward.
I think I think also it protects your bandwidth, right? Like just looking at like that approach, because you're not then thinking, oh, I've got to do a piece to camera because they're about to do this and then I've got to do that, etc. Like, yes, in an ideal world, that's what you would do. But actually, I think potentially you could think about it as this way. Like, actually, if someone's listening maybe and thinking about doing that, are you doing your client a disservice? Like, whenever I do mine, I've wrapped. basically I've wrapped. So I'm basically just referring back to what we did, right? So my initial focus, as I think everyone's focus should be when they get on set, especially in an event context, but in any production, is, hey, what problem are we here to fix? Remind myself of that problem that we're here to fix, and then focus on making sure that the content does that job, right? And then if there's time at the end, or sometimes I'll do like, oh, I've got the behind the scenes, or here's like the setup, etc., and then I'll talk through it in a studio context. But for me also, it's about understanding like when that's. So I guess in some ways you could just say it's like reading the room, right? Like when is that appropriate to do? When is that not appropriate to do? And or was that planned in? And or was the client aware of it? And how do they feel about it, etc. And I think it's about how you manage that. And actually, maybe if that's something you are going to do, maybe look at like, especially if it's a returning client, maybe look at it saying, well, actually, and this is really counterintuitive because you're sacrificing profit and then sacrificing profit, but maybe add a percentage discount because you get the marketing out of it. But then also you have to then pay someone, which in turn means you're kind of losing money again. But if you've planned it in, you'll still make good profit, in my view, right? I mean, do you think that's an approach or not?
For sure. I would always try and not have to pay first, right? Not have to give the client a discount in order to do it, because, like you said, you're kind of losing double money at that point. We write it into our contracts, so it's a line item within the contract of like self-promotion. We are going to use the opportunity as and when appropriate to capture behind the scenes content and promotional content for our own brand. Obviously, like if people have a problem with that, I'm not going to not do a job because they won't let us do it. And obviously certain jobs are also a bit more, certain events are a bit more, how would we say, like they don't want to be as publicly facing.
Yeah,
right?
so yeah, sensitive,
So
right?
yeah, sensitive, great word. So that is that's a something that we consider as well. And it's really just like we have solid relationships with our clients. The fact that in the events industry, we have long-standing relationships, and I can just have that conversation with people. But as you said, it's a part of the sales process. It's a part of the contract. It's expected, and I think that most of the points of contention within capturing behind-the-scenes content come from a place where it was a surprise. They didn't expect you to whip out the camera and start filming yourself.
Yeah, and it would also be kind of a reaction like, what the fuck are you doing kind of thing, in some respects.
And some clients love it. Some clients are like, it's almost double videos for them because it's showcasing their event and the way that you're capturing it and the behind the scenes and that sort of stuff as well. I feel like if you've got a good personality on camera, it's almost like having a promotional piece kind of for the event as well. But also other clients don't, and that's totally fine as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've to give you the audience some context. I mean, I've done jobs which I can't even speak about because of NDAs, but also like it was just a conversation with the clients. Like, yeah, this kind of isn't appropriate. The day's gonna be really busy, and actually half of this stuff, like, I'm not even gonna be able to use anyway or I'm gonna have to heavily blur like half the stuff in the background because of where we are, etc., 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 etc. So it's just like at that point, you're just like, it's not really worth it. But for those people who've really enjoyed this conversation, they want to see more of your content, they want to connect with you, maybe they want to hire you to do an event or talk about that, etc. I mean, where's best for people to reach out to you?
LinkedIn, best place. That's where I am most active in terms of the content. You'll find me there. It is me that runs the accounts, so you are actually speaking to me if you message me. So just send me a message there. Like, we're very easy in terms of the way that we go about things. If it's right for you and it's right for us, then we can talk about it.
Magic. And there's a final question I'll add on, but it just jumped to mind as something that maybe you're challenging that I'd be curious on your perspective on, because I've watched some videos where you're talking about it. I mean, a vulnerability potentially of both of our businesses, we are very founder led, right? Clients want us involved in every single stage of the process. Is that just like the nature of it sometimes? Are you just like, okay, it is what it is? Like, that's, I guess, what I'm going to have to live with to be able to make the money I make and be able to run the business I run? Or is there a way you can transition it?
I think that you can transition it for new people. I know that you left a comment on my YouTube video that I made, which is basically, it's just like, it's not an expectation that we're there. But I think ultimately, if you have a strong personality that people connect with, and half of the reason why they go with you is because it's you, then you are going to run into issues doing that with certain people. I think like pre-existing clients who have always known you to be the one that's there, but then also certain clients are totally okay with it and they understand it's a natural progression within the business process, right? It's something that I can't necessarily speak on too confidently right now because it's something that we're still figuring out. Obviously, if we're looking to scale to the point that we are, then I can't be involved in every single project because I just don't have unlimited time. And I think that's my hypothesis for this, is that the brand, whilst it can still be founder led and come from the vision and the mission that the founder originally had, I think that the brand has to have its own characteristics and qualities and quality assurances for the clients and stuff like that as well. And I think that's where the leverage is with regards to me not having to be on set every single time in order for a client to sign with us, basically.
Yeah, and I also think to an extent in that respect you need to be overly transparent with the fact that you might not be, right, especially in your space, because obviously an event may be happening at the similar time to another event, and actually you may want to actually serve both, right? And I guess, I mean, feel free to weave that your next answer into this as well. Like that might be just like an advice piece that you need to give to some people of how you manage that. But I like to end the podcast by asking the guest, you in this case, of course, what would you say to 10 years ago to the younger version of you now? What advice would you give them?
I would say that it's going to be a lot harder than you expect it to be, and that the people that you look up to online probably aren't giving you the most accurate depiction, as I don't, of the reality of running a business and doing this. But ultimately, it's the most fulfilling thing that you're going to do. Like, I love this. There is not a single thing that I was having this conversation with my cousin the other day because he's 19 and he's trying to figure out whether he wants to go to university or what he wants to do with his life. And I said, well, you have to ask yourself, and ideally you're getting yourself in a position where you would continue to do the thing that you do every single day, regardless of whether you get paid or not, because I would still do this, right? There's certain things that we wouldn't do, right? Like dialing paid ad leads and stuff like that. But,
Yeah.
like ultimately the goal and the end destination, I would continue to do regardless of whether I was being paid or not to do it. So yeah, it's just set expectations to my younger self that it's going to be way harder than you expect it to be, but it's going to be more fulfilling than you could ever think it could be.
Magic. Thank you ever so much for the time, my friend.
Pleasure.
Thank you ever so much, ladies and gents. If you did take value from this video, you'd like to see more like it, I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And feel free to let me know in the comment section down below what you thought. And I'll see you very, very soon.